Awesome. I have hit the record button. That means we may or may not use this for any type of distribution, any type of coaching, any type of informational pushes whatsoever. So be aware if your camera's on, anything you say will be recorded. This is Multifamily Masters Live. What is Multifamily Masters? We are the world's largest, if not yet, we will be the world's largest multifamily cash flow platform. We have 70 plus meetups all across the world. What does that mean? Every month we have 70 meetups, 70 locations all across the world, all across the country, where anywhere from 15 to 130 people meet every month. What does that mean? That means that our reach is pretty strong, where we were growing at a very rapid pace up until this whole COVID thing. Since the COVID thing took off, we just decided to kind of switch gears a little bit, throw out as much valuable content as possible. And that's what we're doing right now tonight with our Multifamily Masters Live. Third Monday every month. I think during the entire COVID thing, we're actually going to step it up a notch, and we're going to do something every 2 weeks. So 2 weeks from now, look for something else. Just try to keep you occupied, deliver some really good, solid content while you guys are sitting at home and strategizing for some of the opportunities that are about to present themselves. We have a large Facebook group. If you are not a member of that Facebook group, you will definitely want to register. We pump out content every day. The name of that Facebook group, MultifamilyMasters.com. Once again, that's MultifamilyMasters.com Facebook group. We have a YouTube channel, MultifamilyMasters.com. If you get on YouTube, or if you want to see a recording of this, or if you missed part of it, if you get on YouTube and you type in Multifamily Masters, or you type in Garrison Gilberts, that is my name, it will pop up until we get the YouTube channel set up just right with the name change. We have a monthly newsletter that goes out every month, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, we're here to help you win. I partnered up with two awesome individuals to make Multifamily Masters happen, and we have a really solid team around us. I partnered up with a gentleman named Pao Chi, who has approximately 1,000 plus apartments. I have 600 plus apartments. I have 20 years real estate experience. Ferris Musa, our third partner, has 1,500 plus apartments. We have an awesome team with Bethany Smith, who just closed on a 40 unit. She's doing some incredible things. Kyle Mitchell, who has an awesome podcast, recently bought a 100 plus unit apartment building in Arizona. That dude is absolutely on fire. He's someone you're going to want to follow. Qual, who's an absolute brainiac. And we have Leonie Tran, who helps us out, as well as Chris Collins. So we have an awesome team. That's what sets us apart from some of these other platforms, from some of the other Facebook groups. We're very well experienced. There's a group of us. We're not a one-man show. We're really here to help you with every aspect of business, every aspect of real estate. So with that being said, I'm going to let my partners, Mr. Pao Chi and Ferris, introduce themselves a little bit, talk about themselves, and then we're going to introduce the guest speaker tonight, who is going to be talking about the CARES Act. Go for it, Pao.
Awesome. Appreciate that, Garrison. So my name is Powell Chi. I started Multifamily Masters about 2.5 years ago, and now it's grown to, from one chapter here in LA to now we have over 60 chapters all throughout the world, 2 globally, and a bunch all over the place around the United States. Still growing, still very active, still got a lot of interest from other people and chapters applying all the time. And a little about me real quick. I've been involved in real estate since, about 5 years now, and have purchased 7 properties totaling over 1,000 units altogether. Some by myself, some JV, some syndications, and that's kind of where I'm at, and looking to continue that and continue to grow as much as possible. How about you, Ferris?
All right. Hello, everyone. Ferris Musa, for those of you that don't know me. As Garrison mentioned, I have a company called Disrupt Equity, along with my partner, Ben Suttles. And, we have properties throughout Texas, but, we're kind of obviously heavily focused on Multifamily Masters. We actually run the Houston chapter. And, as part of kind of me, Garrison, and Powell putting together really a roadmap for MFM, one of the biggest things we wanted to do is to add value. right? And really figure out how do we continue to teach and educate people. That's a big part of MFM and kind of, really a big part of our charter. And so one of the biggest things that we've heard lately is obviously this CARES Act. There's a lot of misinformation. I mean, it's insane to me. Obviously, for us in our company, we're heavily kind of exploring all different options, and you run across people that have all sorts of crazy assumptions. And so we really wanted to bring on an expert to help MFM and everyone else that's part of MFM learn what the CARES Act is and what it isn't, how to do things the right way, and how to avoid doing them the wrong way, and what are the things to kind of consider. And so kind of with that said, obviously, we decided to, for those of you that don't know, we do MFM Live. We do it once a month as kind of the typical charter, but right now we're trying to move to every 2-week cadence, right? So we can really bring on more speakers and add more value for people that are interested in different topics. And so for this one of the ones we kind of brought to the forefront really is just, bringing on an expert of the CARES Act. And, as part of doing that, obviously John's name came up as kind of, Garrison recommended John. He has that relationship with John. And, John is an expert in just really tax, he's a tax attorney from Columbus, Georgia, 22 years of experience. And from us, one of the most knowledgeable people that we collectively know in the space that can help kind of give guidance. And so we wanted to absolutely make sure John would hop on and really help teach us, myself included, and everyone else on this call, more about the CARES Act and the things to kind of look forward to. And so I think John, I'll let John introduce himself, but as I mentioned, he definitely comes highly recommended, lots of years of experience, and is a dedicated tax attorney. And I think after this, I'm actually going to probably follow up with John separately because I've been looking for a good tax attorney kind of for us in our business. And so John, definitely look for that email from me a little bit later. But with that said, John, do you want to hop on and kind of introduce yourself and kick it off?
Hit the unmute button, John.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
Alrighty, so I'll introduce myself and then we'll share some slides. I'm a tax attorney, tax accountant, real estate investor. That's roughly the order of competence. I'm a very, very, very good attorney, a very good accountant. I do okay at real estate investing. The problem is I've had to go more and more passive because the practice takes so much time. There was a time when I tried to do everything and that did not work well. So the real estate investing has gotten more passive. I live in Puerto Rico now. So thankfully I'm bilingual, so it made the move easier, but I moved here because the tax rate on my practice income and my sales of books and webinars and whatever, my tax rate down here, believe it or not, is one of the few places in the world you can do this, 6%, federal, state, and local combined.
Oh, that's awesome.
So Puerto Rico as a US territory has benefits that you don't get by living in a foreign country. For example, if I move to Switzerland, let's say the Swiss tax me at 20% and my US bracket's 35%, the IRS comes and picks up the 15% differential. Not so in US territories. And Puerto Rico, I think, is the most attractive of all the territories. And the first thing I would say is suspend your disbelief based on what you've heard from the media, because there's a lot of misreporting on Puerto Rico. First thing I'll say is that if you've got any amount of money, like many things in the world, money solves problems. So people ask me, well, do you have electricity after the hurricane? That was 2 years ago. Well, yeah, the whole island does. And the building I'm in never lost electricity for 10 minutes because they have their own generators. Everybody down here is a prepper because of hurricanes, incompetent government, you name it. So just some background. I mean, I have a virtual practice. We have clients nationwide. It's all done pretty much in this format. Most of them are real estate investors. We do have a fair amount of small businesses now that are not real estate. Actually, the real estate, especially the rentals, are more complicated than normal small businesses. I would say normal small business from a tax standpoint is easier to handle than real estate. And so we do consulting, returns. We fight the IRS. I love, love, love going to tax court after audits have gone bad. Unfortunately, in 25 years of practice, I've never been able to take a tax court case to its conclusion because the IRS always settles with me, and the settlement is always so good that I tell the client they're crazy to keep paying me based on the settlement we got. So just a little bit of background. I do invest. I had done a lot of low income, and that's time intensive enough that I don't do that anymore. We've sold almost everything we bought during the prior crash just in time for a new one. So I guess we can start buying again. And that's the optimist in me. So lots going on. What you're going to see tonight is a shortened version to keep this roughly within an hour. I did right when the new law came out, the CARES Act. Within 5 days of it coming out, I had read the 800 pages multiple times. And having done that within 5 days multiple times, wanted to kill others and myself, but instead decided to put on a webinar about 5 days after the law came out. That was about a 3-hour webinar. So I've cut some slides, I've made it a lot shorter. I want to cover essentials, and I especially want to focus on what you're not hearing. So I'm going to be very short on the PPP. That's the payroll protection program. That's the one where you get a loan that gets forgiven. I'm going to be very brief on it. Why? A, it's changed a ton since the law passed. It mutated faster than the damn virus. And so everybody's been all over it. And for the moment, it's quiet because we're out of funding. Now, I think they are about to reauthorize funding. It looks like they're negotiating. Garrison, I haven't been on one of yours before. How politically incorrect do I get to be? Do I get to be my normal self?
You do your thing, my
Open
man.
mic.
You're the guest speaker. Open mic. Have at it.
All right. So the communists have decided that. So the Republicans, who are imperfect, right? Republicans are so easy to pick on, especially with Trump around. I mean, I hate him. People always ask me, how can you listen to what Trump says? And my response is, well, Trump doesn't think about what Trump says, so I don't either. But I do pay an awful lot of attention to what he does, and I like the vast majority of it. As far as the socialists who've gone hard nuts left, here's where we're at. So we've got this PPP program. It's a huge boon to small businesses. As a practical matter, you have to be either on a Schedule C, which for you real estate investors means you're flipping, you're assigning, you've got a management company separately set up for your rental, multifamily type stuff. It only applies if you have W-2s or something that passes through on a Schedule C or shows self-employment income on your 1040. So there are limits to whom it applies. It's been a program. I mean, they had 350 billion and it went like this. Within weeks, they used up all that money, which tells you what a great need there is out there. Now, I also think a lot of people who should not have taken it did take it. We're going to talk about that in a minute because there are some federal criminal, felony type issues with doing that. So I'm going to cover it briefly because it's gotten a ton of coverage. So I'm going to make some generalizations based on what I've seen with my clients, but I'm really going to focus on things you haven't heard so much about. Likewise, the EIDL loans, EIDL, these are the ones straight through the SBA, also apply to landlords. In fact, more applicable, I think, to landlords than the PPP. Because if you can show lost rent, whether it's Airbnb style rent or normal rent, you probably qualify for some sort of EIDL loan. But again, there's been so much written on it and so much out there, I wanted to focus on our scarce time adding value. So I'm going to talk about a few things you probably haven't heard of because everyone has been so focused on the EIDL loans and on the PPP. So I'm going to bring up the slides here in a second. And that takes me back to the discussion of the communists. So the PPP funds ran out. The Republicans proposed a very simple bill. Let's add 250 billion to this. People need it. It was popular. They used the money. The Democrats said, no, no, no. We want another 250 or so billion of stuff that we're into. We need some social justice types of things. Now, in fairness to them, some of the stuff they asked for makes some sense. Some of it is mislabeled as something that looks like it makes sense. But bottom line, they're holding the legislation, this badly needed funding, hostage. And I think voters should remember that when the time comes. For those of you who say there is no difference between Republicans and Democrats, there isn't as much difference as I would like, but there's quite a difference and we're seeing it. So I do think that if you're interested in these or you started with them, you want to make sure you're in line because the funding for the PPP will almost certainly be renewed. There'll be more funding shortly and you want to be ready. The number one issue we've seen with both programs is that you all, and by you all I mean entrepreneurs in general, your paperwork sucks, right? In order to get these loans to go through the bank, you don't have a lot of time. You saw how fast the funds ran out. You can't be fiddling about, running about, and scrambling to get paperwork in order. For example, if you're going for the PPP, you better have your payroll tax returns, your 941s, ready to go. This is not oh, I'll get back with you. I filled out the application, but I don't have the backup documents. I mean, most of you that do multifamily would be familiar with the loan process and how to document these things, but you don't have time to procrastinate the way you normally do. The funding on these things moves so quickly and there's such a need for it. You have to be on it hard and fast. So the first thing I would do after this call, if you're interested in PPP or EIDL, is go find out what paperwork is needed and start it now, so that the instant there's funding, you can submit things in short order efficiently. And by the way, submitting imperfectly is probably worse than not submitting at all, because if you submit and you're missing something, they sit on it before they tell you you're missing something. And then when they finally tell you you're missing something, you go to the back of the line. And given how fast the funding's running out, going to the back of the line is a serious thing indeed. So you really need to be on this, guys. You really need to be organized with it. I'm gonna go ahead and share my slides. So let's see if this functions as planned. Share screen. It says here, I cannot share a screen while another participant is sharing. So somebody's sharing something and I cannot.
Looks like Samantha Yee. I think you're sharing your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I must have.
All right.
Hold on.
Oh,
How
no,
do
it's good. At least you weren't looking at porn, right? This is relevant. We're good.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm sorry. I was gonna share an email that I got today regarding the PPP applications, but let me get out. I don't know how.
Yeah, just hit the stop share, Samantha.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. All right, I'm going to share in a second. And by the way, for most of
My
you, who don't
bad.
know, one of my traditional things when I do one of these is, well, I drink. And so today we've got the wee little, because we're in Puerto Rico and I live very close to the largest by far Bacardi distillery in the world. And they've gotten me hooked on rum. So today's rum, because we're not going to drink cheap things for you guys. I mean, for you guys that are vicariously sharing, we only do the best. And so this is Bacardi Reserva Limitada. This was a gift from the wife. Even has a nice little inscription at the top that's rather off color, so we're not going to show that part. She had some rather suggestive things.
The bat is very fitting for Corona.
Yeah, there you go, right? The hell with the beer. Show me some rum. It'll kill the Corona. In fact, I view the rum the way you might view chemo. The object is to have the rum kill whatever's bothering me before it kills me. Olga wants a shot. Game on, Olga. We're always, come on to Puerto Rico and I'll buy the first round. By the way, if you haven't had a rum old fashioned instead of the regular rum with bourbon or rye, you haven't lived. You got to have a rum old fashioned. It will make you take back stuff you never stole. All right, let's go to share our screen. Can y'all see it?
Yep.
Yeah,
we got
good to go.
I'm going to start scrolling and hitting it. All right, very quickly, the disclaimers. This is not legal advice. This is educational. Legal advice happens when we have an attorney-client relationship, which we don't, when you're paying me $500 an hour and I look at your personal situation. That's not what's happening right now. You're paying me way less than that, as in nothing. And so this is education, not legal advice. What does that mean? If you use the education and it blows up in your face, you get a Darwin Award and I'm not liable. Also, I'm not sensitive or politically correct. I like triggering people. Again, I view that as somewhat Darwinian. We trigger people, they fall down the stairs and bump their head. It's all good. The race is better off. All right, some brief PPP comments. Small community banks consistently across the board were more flexible, faster. I have, of my clients, I'd say 90% of the emails I got within the first week were from small community banks having approved it. The big nationals are way slower. The relationship matters a lot. So if you don't have one, you might go to the bank and make one. Having a large account amount helps. Also, just talking to whoever your banker is, having them know you, getting you to the front of the line is going to matter quite a lot. This is important, this third bullet point. A lot of people signed for this in the EIDL who should not have. To be specific, you are signing under penalties of perjury, federal perjury, and you're not a Clinton, so you don't get out of perjury charges. You're signing under penalties of perjury that you need the money. And I saw a lot of people who are sitting on huge cash reserves go for this money. There's no way they can argue with a straight face that they need it. To give you an idea, I didn't go for it. Thank God, I'm so grateful. My business is booming. Right now, the phone's ringing off the hook even more than normally because people are looking for our help on the kind of stuff I'm going to discuss with you. So I cannot argue with a straight face that I need the money. We're doing better than ever. I didn't go for any of this. So if you signed a federal document, a federally guaranteed loan, and you said something on there that was false and you knew it, People have gone to jail just for checking the wrong box on one of these. So if you took this money, be the EIDL or the PPP, I really damn well hope you needed it and you're not putting yourself at risk. You notice Shake Shack gave back the money. That was just in the news today. Shake Shack had, I think it was like, I don't know, 20 million
10
or something.
million. 10 million.
10 million of some big number. They gave it back. Why do you think that is? Because their lawyer looked at that after they did it and said, what did you sign? What did you say? You better give that money back, right? Orange, bad on you, just totally bad. Make sure that you have Schedule Cs and 1099s if you don't have employees. You can qualify for the PPP if you have a Schedule C. If you get 1099s, you want to show up with those. Otherwise, you want to show up with your 2019 Schedule C, which means you have to get it done, showing that you made money. Some banks will accept a really good set of books, a profit and loss, and a balance sheet, but you better show up with good records. I'm not just going to take your word for it. Contractors generally don't count as employees. They have to file for their own PPP. So those are the major revelations from the last few weeks. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because you've seen this ad nauseum elsewhere. EIDL, this is the loans directly from law people. As we
Did we just lose John?
Hopefully he will log right back in.
Puerto Rico is far away.
Go ahead, pal. Go ahead and take this presentation over.
Yeah, pal, pick it up. It's all you, man.
Yeah, I got it. Except for it is, you know, I can't say that the disclaimer with me, you know, it is an actual attorney-client privilege when we talk. Just kidding.
This is where if you just give a long enough intro, pal, before you start, you'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Pal Chi. I'm not an attorney. Anything I say can and won't be used against me. It's just, anyways. Let's wait a few more minutes, see if he hops back on.
Hello.
He was doing good. And I guess I'll pick up. I do agree with him about the small banking relationship. I mean, we saw that firsthand. I mean, really talking to a bank, and I'm glad we made a change back in January, or actually December. We moved all of our accounts off of Wells Fargo to a small bank, and it's been great. I mean, having kind of a specific person there, they kind of see all the accounts that we have, and we do get that extra level of touch. And so for those of you that haven't done that, I do highly recommend that.
Which bank?
We're in Independent, IBTX. But really, you want any small to medium bank, right? That's maybe my answer.
I know me personally, I've used US Bank for a long time, and they've been pretty good to me, even when I wasn't doing any real estate investing at all. And now with real estate investing, they still are doing really, you know, still doing good things. Like I said, I just got a line of credit with them pretty recently, and it was like in the middle of all this, and went through. And
all right, I think we got John back. John's building never lost power, not even during the hurricane, but did right now, right, John?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Good
you.
to go.
There we go.
Okay, so here's the deal. The internet here is usually pretty good. These last few weeks, once in a while it drops. So I moved closer to the router. Sorry about that. I'll pick up where I left off. Hopefully it doesn't happen again, but it's a Murphy's Law thing. Hold on. What? No, voy a estar viendo. My wife's bossing me around and it's being recorded, so we have proof. Right? This is what happens when you marry a Latina. They do not lack for the whole imperative case. Good Lord. All right, let's get that
Luckily,
screen.
you're an attorney, you complete your argument, right?
Well, wait, we have to make sure the internet doesn't drop, because now she's giving me the Lorena Bobbitt look, and we want to make sure that I stay on screen being recorded constantly. Otherwise,
You need that evidence, hard evidence.
yeah, at least you know, you guys could see what happened. All right, let's go back to the share. Let me know when you can see the share.
Yep. Good. I think you dropped off on the previous screen though.
Yeah. Let me back it up. So let's see here. Okay, so there's the idle loans. We were talking about how the free money isn't free. It's actually an advance on a loan. They're not giving everyone the advance. They're not giving everyone the full advance. And the only time the advance becomes forgiven is when they reject you for the loan. If they gave you an advance but they reject you for the loan, then it becomes actually a freebie, a giveaway. So I think there was a lot of, let's just say, optimistic advertising in terms of how that was portrayed. And we have seen landlords and Airbnbers getting those loans. And again, the same statement applies. You are saying under penalties of perjury, federal law, that you need the money. Now, there's some discussion of who's you. Like, you might just be the company. So if the company's broke and you have $1 million in your bank account, there's an argument that the company needed the money. So you have to pay attention to who's signing. But given that that's a federal issue, I would have a little bit of care with it. All right, what I'm going to cover now applies directly to landlords, which would presumably include multi-unit people. Towards the end, I'm going to switch over to what applies only to W-2 people. So let me reach down here and get my booze. I moved because this is closer to the router. And so instead of being custom set up with a little table for booze, I actually have to reach for it, which is very sad. Gracias, amorcita. Okay, so unemployment. I just wanted to reiterate, I talked to a lot of landlord clients who are worried about getting paid. If your tenant had any sort of job, including as a contractor, not just a W-2, let's say they were an Uber driver or a roofer. Let's assume they were legal and actually received a 1099 as opposed to illegal and receiving cash. Not that that ever happens. If you have tenants who are eligible for unemployment, so they worked full-time for a W-2, part-time for a W-2, part-time for a 1099, there are massive benefits for them. In fact, it's going to create already has really created a labor shortage in some areas because the federal supplement to regular unemployment is extremely generous. Specifically, if somebody is on a 1099, all they got to do is show that they were making money on a 1099. It appears there isn't even a threshold for the amount. They take that into the state. Once the states are geared, their computer systems are still behind. They take that in, they immediately qualify for 1/2 the state average, which is typically around $250 per week, plus $600 per week from the feds. So they qualify, if they were contractors, really of any sort, for about $800 a week. That's generally enough to make the rent. If they were an employee, then the amount they qualify for is going to be driven by the state formula. In other words, maybe $200 a week, maybe $100 a week, maybe $300 a week under the state formula, but the feds are still adding $600 a week to that for 39 weeks. Furthermore, it's retroactive. So even though right now the states really aren't ready to process these claims, they're only now getting into it. And in fairness, this is all changing so quickly, and government isn't really known or set up for speed. That's a tremendous amount of money. So if your tenants had a job, even as a contractor, even part-time, they probably qualify for an awful lot of unemployment. What I did with one of my tenants, because I only have 3 tenants left, right? We've sold just about everything else. With one of them, we set up a forbearance agreement. Basically, we went to our tenant landlord attorney. We got an agreement that said, you're behind, we can evict you. We're not going to evict you, we're going to hold off as long as A, you show us progress on your unemployment filings. B, once you get these checks, we're made whole. We're not going to charge you a late fee, but we do expect to get paid if you're getting unemployment. And if you don't pay us, but you have the money, then we have an agreement that says we can automatically evict you. I also want that in writing to show a judge that I'm a good guy. I was waiting, I was patient, I didn't evict anyone right away. And I would say it's in your interest, if your tenants are not real sophisticated, a lot of them aren't, you might even help them with the filing process or have one of your team, one of your management people help them with paperwork, because a lot of people are not good at paperwork. We have found that if you try and sign up for unemployment late at night after 10 p.m., you're more likely to get it because the sites are crashing. In other words, the state websites are really not geared for this. So I just wanted to point out that the unemployment, people who normally don't qualify do, and the amounts are very large. This is indirectly important to you because it allows your tenants to pay. Now, if your tenants did not have a job, they were presumably paying through some other means, and that other means, hopefully, presumably, continues. All right, let's talk about loans from qualified retirement plans. So if you have a non-IRA plan, typically a 401k, but there are other versions of qualified retirement plans. So if you have that solo 401k, if you have a regular 401k, presumably one that is self-directed. All right, we need to mute everybody. Somebody here needs muted. Everybody check and make sure you're muted. Right, because remember,
I'll mute them all.
cool. All right, cool. So you can borrow from a 401k. The normal rule, the law allows you to borrow, but the 401k plan also has to allow it, and not all of them do. Most of the self-directed ones do allow it. What's the amount they allow you to borrow normally? 50% of the assets in the plan or $50,000, whichever is greater. So $50,000 or 50% of the assets in the plan. Sorry, whichever is lesser. That was a misspoke. I need to drink again. I can't believe I misspoke on that. So 50% of the assets in the plan or 50 grand, whichever is less. That's how much you're able to borrow from your 401k. That's changed. Now you have to change the plan documents to permit this, right? They give you until 2022 to change the plan documents. So they're giving you a lot of time to have done retroactively. For most of you that have access to self-directed 401k plans, your custodian will make the change or your plan provider. For those of you who have 401ks at your job, for those of you who still have W-2 jobs, that's just going to depend on whether or not your employer wants to do this. But what they're saying is you can now borrow the lesser of 100% of the plan assets or 100 grand. So basically they've doubled the amount you can borrow. 100% of the plan assets up to 100 grand, whichever is less. So this is if you need, okay, so again, somebody's not muted and you're fiddling around with papers or something. This is not the time to turn your porn up really loud either. So if y'all check your microphones. So you can't borrow from an IRA. This only works with qualified plans, 401ks. The change in the law is as long as you adapt your plan documents, you can borrow more. You can borrow up to $100,000 instead of 50 grand. Now let me give you a caution. You do have to qualify. My next slide is going to show what are the qualifications to be able to borrow this much. So we're going to get into that. If you look at the first bullet point here, this only applies to qualified individuals. We're going to define that on the next slide. Who's a qualified individual? It's pretty easy to qualify. Next, only do this if you really have to, guys. I love buying real estate, including rentals. I still have some rentals and 401ks that we're selling. I love using self-directed retirement accounts to do this. It's a highly tax efficient thing to do if done right, especially in a 401k where it's much easier to borrow in order to buy real estate. So that's one of the strategies maybe another time we can get into. But you only take money out of a retirement plan in an emergency. Why? Because in the retirement plan, the money grows tax-free. That's like the womb. We love the womb. The womb is warm and happy, and we listen to classical music and mommy's voice and AC/DC, and it's all good. But then when you get forced out of the womb, oh, nasty. Someone smacks you, it's cold, and worst of all, taxable. So we like money to stay in a 401k because it grows tax-free, particularly in a Roth. We don't like to take it out into the taxable world, except for two reasons. Either one, you really, 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 really need the money, or two, there's a deal outside the IRA, or I should say outside the 401k, that you can't do inside. There are certain types of deals, without going into details, that are prohibited inside of a 401k or an IRA. So for example, let's say my mom wants to sell me a really good property really cheap. Now that's hypothetical because my mom would never do that. Love you, Mom, but it's true. So I can't buy a really sweet property in my 401k from my mother because she's what's called a disqualified person. However, if I took the money outside of the 401k, now I could buy the property from mom. So those are the two reasons to take money out of a 401k or an IRA. You desperately need it, and it negates the benefit of the benefit of tax-free, or there's a deal that you otherwise couldn't do in one of those accounts. Who's a qualified individual? And here you have it. I'm going to go through it briefly. We can email these slides out so you guys can refer back to them later, and this is being recorded. So once they delete out the part where I was offline, you can come back and rewind and listen. But if you're diagnosed with the virus with an approved test, if you have a spouse or dependent who's diagnosed, and here's the really gray broad one, who experiences adverse financial consequences as a result of being quarantined, furloughed, or laid off, having work hours reduced due to the virus, being unable to work, or lack of child care, closing or reducing of hours, so reduction in hours of a business owned or operated by the individual, and other factors as the IRS may put out. So that last paragraph, the third paragraph, is where the money is at. But note, if you're diagnosed with this at any time, you want to save that paperwork because that's your ticket to being a qualified individual, and it allows you to have this extra ability to borrow from the 401k. So you have to be a qualified individual, take a look at these bullet points, any one of these three, and you have to have a plan document modified from the old law to the new law that permits you to borrow in this manner. So it's a way to access money. In addition to borrowing, you can also take up to $100,000 withdrawal from your retirement plans. You can take $100,000 withdrawal. We're going to go through these special conditions. First of all, to take that special withdrawal, you have to be one of these, a qualified individual, so it's the same rules. What kind of withdrawal can you take? First of all, this can be done through IRAs and 401ks. So if you have a 401k and you have IRAs, you could take this $100,000 withdrawal from the IRAs. All the IRAs are treated as one account. It doesn't matter how many you've got. Or you can, I should say, and you can take $100,000 from the 401k. In fact, the 401k, you could take the $100,000 loan, and if you still have $100,000 left in the 401k, you can also take $100,000 withdrawal. So you can potentially take up to 200 grand out of a 401k. So there's the qualified individual slide. What does this mean? They're waiving the early withdrawal penalty. So if you withdraw money from an IRA or a 401k before you're 59 and a half, there's a 10% penalty. That penalty is being waived. What they're not waiving is the income. You're still taxable. You're still taxable unless what? So you pull 100 grand out of your IRA. You pull 100 out of your 401k. You can avoid taxation on that money, so they automatically waive the early withdrawal penalty. But the default rule is you're still taxable unless what? You pay the money back to the plan within 3 years. You put the money back in the IRA, you put the money back in the 401k, or you put the money back into an account that the IRA could have been rolled over into, or that the 401k could have been rolled over into. So if you put the money back within 3 years, the same account, or into any account that those accounts could have been rolled over into, you avoid the tax altogether. It ends up being a loan. So it's another way to access retirement money. And again, the same rules apply. You only do this if you really have to, or you only do it if there's such a sweet deal outside the IRA or 401k that you could not have done it inside. There's no withholding on these withdrawals. Now, they haven't clarified these last few bullet points. They haven't clarified, do you file for the income on the 2020 return, or do you wait until 2023 to see if you paid it all back? The IRS hasn't clarified this yet, so we are going to expect some guidance from them. Which tax return, which year do we report this in? Now, even if you don't pay the money back, so you take this withdrawal, you're a qualified person, you pull 100 grand out, you think you're going to pay it back, you swear to God you're going to pay it back. It's just like you're going to lose weight January 1st, and by February 1st, you're eating ho-hos and Twinkies and drinking rum. It all just went to hell. So you end up not paying the money back. What happens? You're taxed on the withdrawal unless it's a qualified Roth IRA withdrawal, in which case you could have pulled the money anytime anyway. So you're taxed on it, but you've got 3 years to pay the tax. The tax is spread out over 3 years. So you can pull up to 100 grand. If you pay tax on it, it's spread out over 3 years. There's no early withdrawal penalty. And if you pay it back within 3 years, it's really a loan instead of having been a distribution. So these are ways to tap some money if you need to. Required minimum distributions. And I put RMDs because I was in tax geek mode and wasn't thinking of talking to human beings. So RMD for humans means required minimum distributions. Once you hit, depending on when you were born, the age of 70 and a half or the age of 72, or if you have an inherited IRA, you are required to withdraw a certain amount per year. Well, for 2020, there's no requirement. Basically, the RMD law does not apply in 2020. Hold on, quick interruption. Amor, ¿me puedes hacer un favor? ¿Me puede pasar el enchufe porque la batería se está yendo? See, now I'm being nice to her because I want something. So she's bringing me the plug. I was running on battery. It's running down sooner than I wanted. So now it's amorcita. All in the technique, gents, all in the technique. And see, she won't harm me on tape. This is great. I'm being recorded here. Put the knife down. All right. So required minimum distributions. If you already made the required minimum distribution, you had 60 days from when you took the required minimum distribution to put it back. So you have 60 days to put it back from when you took it, or you just count it towards your $100,000 distribution if you're going to take it. But bottom line, required minimum distribution rules don't apply for 2020. And let's click back on here, scroll down. Okay. You have more time to make 2019 contributions. So 2019 contributions to your IRAs, health savings accounts, and Coverdale accounts, normally you have until April 15th of 2020 to make your 2019 contribution. Now you have until July 15th to make those. So if you missed it, you didn't miss it, but it only applies to IRAs, health savings accounts, and Coverdales. It does not apply to 401ks. In other words, if you missed the 401k contribution in 2019, you missed it. Here are some deadlines that have been extended. 1040s and Form 1120, that's for a C corporation that's on a calendar year. C corporation that's on a calendar year, not on a fiscal year. Those have been automatically extended to 7/15. Late payments, the penalties for paying after April 15th have been waived through July 15th. Extended deadlines have not changed. So for your S corporation and partnership returns, you have till September 15th. For your personal return and your corporate return, you have until October 15th, assuming that you extended in a timely manner. Here are some important ones, guys. For 1031s, your 45-day period to select properties and your 180-day period have been extended. If any of those days falls after April 1st, let's see, April 1st through July 14th. So if your 45-day or your 180-day, right, on a 1031, you have 45 days to what? Pick properties. You have 180 days to do what? Close on the replacement property. If any of those dates fell between April 1st and July 14th, the actual deadline is July 15th. So they've extended your deadlines. Here's my favorite, that second to last bullet point. I don't know if you guys have done a webinar on opportunity zones. If you're not doing apartments in opportunity zones, multifamily units in opportunity zones, you are high, right? You are, and it's not even a good high, like cheap, bad heroin mixed with crack, a bad high. Opportunity zones are the sweetest tax break if you can qualify for them. Let me give you a very brief synopsis. Maybe we'll do another webinar on those. Opportunity zones are basically, they're certain zones, they're census tracts. It's mostly lower income, down and out areas, but some of it is gentrifying. Some of it's becoming very nice very quickly, or at least it was. If you buy, rehab, and rent in those areas. So you do what you guys normally do, but I'm going to add 2 steps. I know you guys normally buy. I know you normally hold. I know you normally rent. You're used to that part. If you happen to do that in an opportunity zone and you do massive rehab or new build, you do massive rehab or new build, and I'm not going to define those terms now. I'm just using normal English because I don't want to get into a bunny trail. If you do that, several wonderful things happen. First of all, to have an opportunity zone fund, which is really just an LLC that follows certain rules, you have to invest capital gains in it. So for example, you sell an apartment building, you have capital gains. Maybe instead of a 1031, you invest those capital gains into an opportunity zone LLC, which by the way, you can have your own privately held small opportunity zone LLC. We set them up for people all the time. So you can have your privately held little opportunity zone fund. What happens when you invest capital gains into that? 3 wonderful things. A, the capital gains are deferred until 2026. The capital gains are deferred, which net present value, right? Would I rather pay taxes today or in 7 years? Hello, 7 years. 2, the 10% of the capital gains are forgiven if you hold the fund, that is the LLC. If you hold the LLC for 5 years, 10% of the capital gains are forgiven. So in 2026, you only pay 90% of the capital gains. And the best benefit of all, this is by far the best. I call it the J-Lo benefit because it's this great, big, beautiful back end. Once the LLC, the Opportunity Zone Fund LLC, turns 10, so it completes its 10th birthday, anything it sells tax-free with no depreciation recapture. Let me repeat that. Once the Opportunity Zone LLC turns 10, anything it owns sells tax-free with no depreciation recapture. Do I have your attention? So one of the benefits that they have with the COVID, with the CARES Act, is that they extended the deadlines. There are certain deadlines. When you have a capital gain, you have a certain amount of time to reinvest that capital gain into an Opportunity Zone LLC. And that amount of time is typically 180 days up to 1.5 years. Now it depends on things we don't want to get into right now. Bottom line is if you had capital gains in 2019, it's probably not too late to roll those into an Opportunity Zone fund, even if it's your own private fund, and then go buy apartment buildings in these areas. But it only works for new build and for massive rehab. So if you're buying turnkey, unless you're buying a new build turnkey, it doesn't really work. But the tax benefits, guys, of this are huge, and they've extended some of the deadlines on that. Now, if I didn't put it on here, note my last slide. If it's not on here, the deadline didn't change. Please stop calling and emailing me and asking me, did my S Corporation deadline change? No, it's not on here. It didn't change. All right, net operating losses. For those of you generating losses, the Trump tax law changed how net operating losses are treated. You are no longer allowed to carry them back. If you generate losses, let's say you have a bunch of depreciation losses from your multifamily units, and you also qualify as a real estate professional, then these losses translate into net operating losses, meaning they're usable on your 1040. They drop other types of income. If you have net operating losses from your apartment complexes, and let's say you have W-2 income, those losses can reduce the W-2 income to 0. Let's say you've got so many losses, it reduces your income to 0. That's called a net operating loss. The Trump tax law said you can only take those forward into the future. But now for tax years 2018, 2019, and 2020. So 2018, which means you'll have to amend if this applies to that year, for the years 2018, 2019, and 2020. If you have net operating losses, you can carry them back 5 years and get refunds. In other words, I could take my 2018 loss back to my 2013 return, reduce my 2013 income to 0, carry whatever loss is left over into 2014, reduce that income, and so on. Why is that favorable? Because you get immediate refunds, right? If you can carry losses from 2018, 19, and 20 back into the past and amend prior returns, you can get refunds on those prior returns. Should you do that? That's a net present value calculation. Now you or your accountant need to run the numbers, right? I'll give you an example. If you had $50,000 taxable income showing on your tax return, 2013 through 2017, low bracket income, only taxed at 15%. And in 2021, you think you're going to be making $1 million, you're going to be in the 37% bracket, you don't want to carry back, you want to carry forward. Why? Because the value of offsetting 37% income is much higher than the value of offsetting 15% income, even taking into account that you'd get a refund on the 15% income right away. So you got to do the math on these net operating losses. So for those of you who are showing, go to your 2018 return, go to your 2019 return. If you're showing taxable income of 0 or less, if you're showing a net operating loss, ask your CPA, just email your CPA. Did I have a net operating loss in 18 or 19? And if the answer is yes, you did, say, all right, please do an analysis. Look and see, is it worth carrying back 5 years and getting immediate refunds? Or should I hold on to that loss and take it forward, right? So talk to your accountants about that. This is a tremendous opportunity. Oh, now I'm using Trump words. Tremendous, huge. So there's your action item on the second slide. If you had, find out if you had net operating losses, what we call NOLs in the tax world. And if you do, figure out, are they better applied in the past or in the future? Qualified improvement property. All right, if you have commercial non-residential property, restaurants, retail establishments, etc. If you did internal improvements, so not external, not a patio, not an awning, not the sidewalk, if you did internal improvements to whatever commercial non-residential property you've got, they changed the depreciation retroactively. The depreciation was over 39.5 years, which meant, let's say I had a restaurant and I did a brand new bar area and I put 100 grand in it. At a 39.5% depreciation rate, what's that worth to me? About $1,200 in depreciation per year. Not so good. They changed the law. Guess how much of that $100,000 you can now depreciate in year one? All of it. You can take all of it through what's called bonus depreciation from 18 going forward. So if you put an internal commercial non-residential improvement into service in 2018 or 2019, doesn't include, by the way, does not include elevators and escalators, but if you put something like that in the service, ask your accountant this: did I have any 39.5-year property on my returns put into service in 18 or 19? Did I have any 39.5-year property put into service in 18 or 19? And if the answer is yes, the next question is, was it an internal improvement that was not an elevator or escalator? And if the answer is yes, you probably want to amend because your deduction just went up by some massive amount. So internal, non-residential, commercial improvements get retroactive ability to write off the improvement, all of it at once, instead of depreciating it little by little. There's an example. You guys can look through it. It's very similar to what I just said verbally, slightly different numbers. I'll let you go back and look through it because I want to get through. I got a bunch more slides. I'm trying to jam it all in. All right, going forward, this only applies if you've got W-2s or a Schedule C. So if you're a strictly landlord person, all your income is coming through on Schedule E or on line 2 of your K1 is rental income or rental loss. The rest of this doesn't really apply to you. Now, maybe it should apply, right? For you guys that have multi-units, that have a lot of units, you may want to have a separate management company. If you don't have a separate management company, typically, but not always, a C corporation, then you're probably missing out on some huge tax benefits. So if you have a lot of units, even if you don't have that many units, if you don't have a separate management company, especially if you have a large volume of units, if you don't have a separate management company, probably a C Corp, maybe an S Corp. I can't tell you for sure because I need to know more about you. You're missing out on an awful lot of benefits. Let me give you an example. Your normal rental income does not qualify you to have a 401k and to buy real estate tax-free, truly tax-free through a Roth 401k. Having a management company can qualify you for a 401k, maybe even for a defined benefit plan, which I've seen people contribute annually, 250 grand or more, tax deductible to a defined benefit plan, and then turn around and go buy property with that. I mean, when you're jacking 250 grand a year into a retirement account, it adds up pretty quick. You can buy properties through that account pretty quick, maybe even without a whole bunch of leverage. So something to think about, just a side note here, if you don't have a management company, it may make sense. And just a rule of thumb, size matters, right? If you've got a half a dozen to a dozen single family residences, which I understand that's not what you guys are really into, but maybe you got some people that do that, a management company probably doesn't make sense for you because there has to be a certain scale for it to make sense. But if you're getting into multifamily and if you've got the numbers of units that some of you were talking about, you really want to sit back and talk to somebody. I know a guy in Puerto Rico who does business nationwide you might want to talk to about getting a management company set up and maxing out the benefits on that. So if you have employees, and that includes you, that includes your kids, and it includes your spouse. Let's say you do have an S corporation for some reason. You have a C corporation for some reason, and it's got employees. And those employees, it might be that the only employee is you. You are required to pay sick and family leave due to coronavirus. You are required to pay this, and we'll walk through what the requirements are. That's the bad news. Let me give you the good news. The government will reimburse you 100% for what you pay. The government will reimburse you 100% for the sick and family leave you pay. So what's the angle? First of all, with employees that are not family, look, you got to follow the law. It says if you got employees, you got to pay this. So you pay it because you don't want to break the law. But then you go get reimbursed. Why might that be beneficial? If you can pay a regular employee sick leave for 2 weeks, instead of paying them regular salary, you pay them sick leave that might be equal to their regular salary, depends how much they make. And then the government reimburses you for that 2 weeks of salary. Congratulations. The government just paid 2 weeks of salary for you. Now, that could be worth something, right? I pay local attorneys here, let's just say in the upper tens, let's say 80 grand a year. What's 2 weeks worth if the government's picking up the tab? I like it. If you have to pay 10 weeks of family leave, which maxes out at $200 a week, if you have to pay for it, then let the government pick up the tab. Now let's switch gears a little. Let's say you're the sole employee of the company. Are you feeling sick? If you are, and we'll go through the requirements, I'm being mildly facetious. If you qualify, if you have the virus, or if the lockdown meant you could not work, and that's the key, that you really could not work, you pay yourself for the period, the government reimburses you for that pay. So let's go through the requirements. And again, you're gonna have these PowerPoints, you're gonna have this recording. So I'm gonna go a little bit quickly, but you can rewind and listen to it because I want to get through this in a reasonable amount of time. So the requirement kicked in April 1st. If you have fewer than 500 employees, you must pay 80 hours, which is basically 10 days. You must pay 80 hours, 10 days of sick leave. And that number, that's a typo. The 12 weeks is 10 weeks of family leave. We're going to go through both of those. So 10 weeks of family leave, 2 weeks of sick leave. Sick leave is at the person's normal rate, whatever you normally pay them, but it's capped at $511 a day. It's capped at $511 a day. Can you pay more than that? Sure, but you're not going to get reimbursed for it. So if someone's sick, and we're going to go through what does that mean to be sick, but the key is the employee really cannot work. So if one of your employees gets the virus and they're down, because this thing's nasty and it puts you down, For 2 weeks, you pay them, the government reimburses you. What if you're the employee? Well, nothing in the law said that the owner cannot benefit from this. So if you're the employee who's down for 2 weeks with the virus, or because of a lockdown cannot work, because that counts, you can pay yourself for 2 weeks. But bear in mind, you truly cannot work, right? It's not wink, wink, I'm still working. No, 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 no. You're signing stuff under penalties of perjury, guys. None of you look good in orange. More importantly, if you go to prison, you can no longer pay my bill. And that makes me sad. Or when you do pay it, you send me like packets of cigarettes and stuff. And first of all, I don't want your cigarettes. And second, I don't want to know what you had to do in prison to get those cigarettes, right? That's like TMI. So don't do that. To the extent you do this, you cannot overlap it with the wages that were reimbursed under the PPP program. So if you remember the first slide, the Payroll Protection Act, the way that works is the government gives you money, it's a loan, until you use it to what? Pay your employees, among other things. Then it becomes a grant, they forgive it. You cannot use the same wages. You can do both. You can do PPP and sick leave, it's just gotta be different time periods. So if I use PPP money to pay my employees in March and April, I'm going to have to do the sick leave during May. I can't overlap it, but I can still do both, just during different times. There's a lot of confusion in that. A lot of people are not getting that right. So basically, the employee can't work, and we're going to go through the reasons that qualify as sickness and for family leave. You're required to pay them a certain amount, in the case of the sick leave, up to $511 a day, and the government reimburses you. So there's, again, I'm a little redundant on this one. How do they reimburse you? It's a tax credit against your employer payroll taxes. So when you file a W-2, there's withholding for Social Security. The government says to reimburse you for the sick leave you paid or for the family leave you paid, we're going to let you keep that money. Don't send us the Social Security tax. You keep that. And then you look at the math and you say, well, I paid them more than I withheld on Social Security taxes. And the government says, all right, if that happens, right, it doesn't always happen. Let's say you have one employee that's sick and you're paying for 6 employees, you can hold back the withholding on the payroll taxes on all 6 employees to cover the salary of the one. So sometimes the withholding is enough to reimburse you on the spot immediately. But if not, that's okay. The government will cut you a check. You file a form with the government, you file the payroll taxes, and they have a new form that just came out, the form 7200, where you say to the government, the payroll withholding that you allowed me to keep was not enough to reimburse me for the sick leave I paid people. I need a check. And you file this form, and they send you a check, what we commonly refer to as a refundable credit. So that's how this works, up to 8 hours a day for 2 weeks. Note, don't spread out the sick leave. The way the law is written, if you do 8 hours a day for 10 days, you get reimbursed. If you do, for example, 4 hours a day for 4 weeks, you don't get reimbursed all the money. You only get reimbursed half. So you want to make sure the sick leave is 8 hours a day for 2 weeks, and that's where it maxes out. You don't want to make it part-time, or you're going to mess yourself up on some of the reimbursement. By the way, if you owe the feds money, they're not going to cut you a check. They're going to keep it and apply it to whatever you owe them. So you can still withhold the payroll tax. But if you file a form with the feds saying, look, the payroll tax withholding wasn't enough, send me a check, some of that check's they're going to keep if you owe them money. So watch out for that. That link at the bottom is a rare thing. It is a coherent explanation of this by the IRS. So this credit, this sick leave credit, this family leave credit, the IRS actually does a pretty decent job of explaining this credit at that link. Go through it, go through these slides. What do I want you to remember? And I'm going to cover family leave in a second, and I'm going to cover what does it mean to be sick in a second. But what do I want you to take away from this? If I got employees and they're sick, the government's going to pick up 2 weeks, even if that employee's me. And we're going to talk about what does it mean to be sick, because you can be sick for the government without actually having the virus. We're going to go through that, what that means. It's a pretty broad definition. It's pretty generous. So here's what the sick leave causes are. Employee is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order. Guys, if you're under an isolation order, you're sick, as long as what? You can't work. Now see, for me, this doesn't work. My practice is virtual. My practice hasn't missed a beat during this virus. Puerto Rico has the strictest quarantine in the United States. We are not allowed outside. We're not allowed to leave our place. We're not allowed outside except for maybe in our backyard, which I don't have one in our apartment complex. We're not allowed to leave except to go to the doctor, to get food at the grocer or one of the restaurants that does takeout. And what was the other one? The bank. Those are the three reasons. If you leave home and it's not for one of those reasons, it's a $5,000 ticket. 5,000 bucks, and the cops are everywhere looking for it. Now, why do they do this? Why is it so draconian? Anyone who's been around Latins knows, right? Latins are not much for following rules, okay? They got a lot of great traits, and that's maybe a great trait and maybe a bad trait, depends on how you want to spin it. But Latins are not much into rules. So they had to do a really hardcore lockdown here in Puerto Rico, or forget it. Nobody would listen. I mean, they'd just be like, this rule is stupid. I'm not listening. Oh, what, $5,000? Okay, I listen. So that's just the culture. It's just how it is. So I don't qualify though. Why? Because I'm still able to work. I'm not missing any time. So what are the other ones? The employee has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to concerns related to COVID-19, or the employee is experiencing symptoms and seeking medical diagnosis. If your employee is home for any of those reasons and unable to work, that's the key, then they're eligible for this. Here's an example. You pay an employee $5 grand in sick leave, and the Social Security withholding is only $3 grand. You keep the $3 grand, and you get a refund of $2,000. In other words, you ask the feds to send you a check for $2,000. Now let's switch the example around a little. If the employer Social Security portion is $9 grand, and the employee was only $5 grand, then you keep $5 grand and you send the other $4 grand in on the withholding. Just to give a very simple example of how this functions. Your payroll company should run it all. I'm giving you the basics so you have a clue, but your payroll company should do all this. You just let them know, I got sick leave, I want the federal money, how do I do this? And do it retroactive. If you already had employees from roughly mid-March, I think the date was March 12th, if you had employees who were home and could not work because of this, go retroactive. Tell your payroll company some of what I paid them was sick leave. I didn't realize it was sick leave at the time, but this tax lawyer persuaded me that it was in fact sick leave because I'm just that kind of guy. And I got to get my Monet from the feds. All right, family leave. Up to 10 weeks, maximum $200 per day. Maximum $200 per day, up to a total of 10 grand. So it could add up. This is if they're required basically to stay home and take care of family. This is in addition to sick leave. So the employee is caring for an individual who's subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine, or an individual, wait, when we start to talk that fast, we need to calm down. Therapy. So the employee is caring for an individual who is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine, or has been advised to self-quarantine. The employee is caring for their son or daughter if the child's school or child care facility has been closed. I'll bet that's pretty common. I'll bet a lot of people out there have employees who can't come in because of this. And maybe the nature of their job is they can't work. For example, in food service or something, maybe a rehabber, maybe a handyman. They qualify for family leave. In fact, you have to pay it, but at least the government's going to pay you back for it. Last but not least, the employee is experiencing any other substantially similar condition specified by Health and Human Services in consultation with a crap load of other bureaucracies. Here's my guess, they haven't gotten their feces in order yet on that last one. They're supposed to come up with rules. That's been kind of slow because, well, government. If you're self-employed, even if you have no W-2 employees, you can still qualify for this. In other words, had you been an employee, but you weren't, But had you been an employee and you would have qualified for sick leave, you can take a deduction for this on your tax return in 2020. A nice big fat deduction up to that. What was that number? 5 grand for sick leave, 10 grand for family leave. If you're self-employed and you would have qualified for family leave, and again, you couldn't work, then you can qualify for up to that 10 grand from the feds. Really, it's a credit. I said deduction, I lied. I'm a lawyer, it's what I do. You'll qualify for the credit even if you're self-employed. So if you're filing a Schedule C, if you're showing self-employment income on your Form 1040, even if it flowed through from a partnership, even if you're not an employee, you still qualify for this benefit. Now here's the catch. You don't get it now. You see, if you are an employee or you got employees, you can get the federal money within a month or two by the filing forms I showed you on the prior slides. With this, you got to wait until you file your 2020 return. But if you're self-employed, let's say you know self-employed people. I got a buddy back home who does HVAC, and because of the lockdown orders, he couldn't go to work. Did these conditions apply to him? Yeah. So as a self-employed guy, can he take advantage of this because he couldn't go to work? Yeah. So that's worth something. Okay, this is a big one. Employee retention credit. Let me summarize. This is an easier one to explain. So the last one was the hardest one to explain. You may have to go back through the slides. You may have to listen to it once or twice. Bottom line, look at those slides that describe what qualifies as sick leave, what qualifies as family leave, as long as the person in question can't work. Now here we don't have the requirement of can't work. So I like this. This one actually applies to me. This is the one thing I can actually take. What is it? The gist, it's a $5,000 handout per employee for not firing them. Now, there are some strings, but there are not that many strings. So if you don't apply for if you don't qualify for anything else, like I didn't qualify for the PPP, which by the way, if you took PPP, you don't qualify for this employee retention credit. It's either or. I didn't qualify for PPP. I was not willing to sign something saying I needed it under penalties of perjury. So I'm going to take this. Let's walk through the requirements. You have a trade or business. Is landlording a trade or business? By the way, guys, that's a huge question that a lot of your accountants have screwed up for very important code section. Code section 199 cap A, the pass-through deduction, is a huge deduction. It says take 20% of your net income. 20% of your net income, that's a deduction. Congratulations. If what? You have a trade or business. So is being a landlord a trade or business? That's a hugely important question for the pass-through deduction. And after doing a ton of research, here's what it boiled down to. And I did like 10 or 12 hours of research on this to uncover it all. If you are a landlord, even if other people do all the work, in other words, we're not asking, are you passive? That's a separate question. And a lot of accountants don't realize that. If you're passive, it has nothing to do with do you have a trade or business. If you have rental properties and they are not triple net leased, which typically residential is not triple net leased, that's only commercial. If you have rental properties and they're not triple net leased, you got a trade or business. That's important, remember that, because it applies to other sections of the code that we're not talking about today. If you're a landlord, even if someone does everything else, you don't do anything personally, so as far as you're concerned, it's passive. Someone else does all the work. If you have rental units and they're not triple net leased, you 99% likely have a quote unquote trade or business, which means, among other things, you get to take the pass-through deduction. So if you have an accountant who said you don't qualify for the pass-through deduction, and I've seen this with large unit investors, they're on crack. They need to be fired. Actually, they probably need to be killed, then fired. So likewise, with this credit, You have to have a trader business. Is being a landlord a trader business? Yes. Is having a management company to manage rental properties a trader business? Yes. Yes, it's a trader business. So if you have a trader business and you employ people during the hard times, and we're going to define hard times in a minute. You employ people during hard times, you get a credit of up to $5,000 per employee. The credit is 1/2 of their wages. So if you're paying them 10 grand or more during the hard times, then you get a credit of up to $5,000. And similar to the credit for family leave, similar to the credit for sick leave, you get it damn quick. It comes off of your 941s, your payroll tax filings. And if that amount's not enough, you can file a 7200, a form 7200, in order to get an immediate check from the government. So this money, you should be able to get this, I would say, easily before the end of June if you're presently employing people, and this particular time counts for you as a hard time. And we're going to define hard time in a minute. So what's the gist? Up to $5,000 per employee if they were employed during the hard times. What are the hard times? The operation of the trader business was partially or fully suspended. And I put in blue partially suspended. The operation of the trader business was partially suspended during the calendar quarter due to orders from an appropriate governmental authority limiting commerce, travel, or group meetings due to coronavirus. So your trader business was partially suspended. What does that mean? For example, here in Puerto Rico, is my trader business partially suspended? Look, we're still working, we're still doing really well. But we do have some issues because we no longer go to the office and see each other. Now, some of that gets made up through Zoom. Some of that gets made up by printing in different places. We do the best we can to make up for it. But is our business functioning the same way it was, completely 100% on all cylinders, the same as it was before the lockdown orders here in Puerto Rico that keep us from going to the office? No. My speaking business, I used to travel and speak. Now I do a lot more of that virtually, and that was kind of my direction anyway, but that's been partially suspended. So you got to think about, has my business been partially suspended due to what? Orders from a governmental authority limiting commerce, travel, or group meetings. Now, for a lot of you, I think the answer is going to be yes. I think the answer is going to, let me ask you this. On your rental properties, are there limits to your ability to rehab? Are you limited in your ability to rehab? Are you limited in your ability to deal with turnover? That when the unit's empty, getting it turned over and getting other people in. Do you have some limits on that? Just thinking right now how this might apply to you. Because if you can show partial suspension, you're in like Flynn. If you can't show that, here's what you have to show. You have to show that your gross receipts declined by more than 50% this quarter compared to the same quarter in 2019. Your gross receipts declined by 50% or more this quarter, or next quarter, or the third quarter, or the fourth quarter, compared to the same quarter in 2019. I think a lot of you are going to have a problem showing that. I think a lot of you have had declines in gross receipts, but not that much. Unless what? You're into Airbnb. The Airbnb people are getting absolutely crushed. They can probably show 50% or more decline. Normal landlords probably are not going to show that kind of decline. Now, your other businesses might. For example, restaurants, oh my God, they're getting crushed. They're going to show the 50% decline. So you got to show partial suspension due to a lockdown or similar order, or you got to show a 50% decline in gross receipts compared to the same quarter last year. That's bad times. If you got bad times in any of your businesses, so maybe one business doesn't qualify, but this other one over here does. Maybe my rental properties don't qualify, but my management company does. This is by business. If you have bad times and you kept the employees, you need to be thinking about getting $5 grand per employee. That can add up rather nicely. So there's the math, kind of what I already explained, but in a PowerPoint slide. No doc loan. Here's what they're saying. The payroll taxes you owe the government, if you have employees, you are allowed to keep those, and the payroll company will tell you how much. I'm not going to get into the actual math and numbers because they're going to run it through a spreadsheet or an algorithm like that. You can keep some of the payroll tax and pay it 2 years down the road. It's a document-free, interest-free loan. The government is saying, instead of paying over payroll tax, we're going to let you keep some of it, and you pay that back 2 years down the road. But as you see in red down at the bottom, do not pay this late. Do not pay this late. Owing the government payroll taxes is worse than owing the Russian mafia money, right? The government has special power, much more than with income tax. They have special powers to come after payroll taxes. You do not want to be on the wrong end of that power. So if you're going to take this money, you're dealing with a loan shark. You better pay it back on time. Do not fiddle around with that. I think that's my last one. Yeah. So guys, here was the purpose of the call. Unlike a lot of people out there, I did not spend a lot of time on PPP or EIDL because you've already read about it and heard about it in a million different places. Plus the law will be new tomorrow. As soon as the funding comes back up, make sure you're on top of that with record keeping. But my experience has been in the last 2 weeks, most of you have gotten pretty familiar with that. But I'm willing to bet, in fact, some of my hosts, you tell me, I'll bet you I told you some stuff you didn't know. Some of this payroll tax stuff, that commercial depreciation break, to give some examples, most of the people I talked to about these things had no idea that that money was out there. This is more subtle and it's not being advertised. And that is why I wanted to focus on it for you tonight. So hopefully you found this useful. We could do a little bit of Q&A and then I'm going to go drink more and pass out. So right now I shall drink moderately such that I not slur the answers to the questions. And then afterwards we'll get a little sloppy.
All right, so I guess for those of you with questions, let's go ahead and type them in the chat, and then maybe I can read them out for the people watching. But I got two questions, John. So as a host, maybe I can get to ask two of them. The first question is, and I think I actually saw someone ask the same question. If you have a net loss, right? Let's just use examples. In 2019, you're a real estate professional. Actually, sorry, let's say 2018. So 2018, you're a real estate professional. You had losses. You can carry them forward. We know that. Now we can carry it also back 5 years. So now if in 2014, just to use example, a person paid $50,000 in taxes. Now, but they did not qualify as a real estate professional at the time. Does that still hold true?
Yeah, so let's do an example. You generated a $100,000 loss in 2018. If you choose to carry back 5 years, the carryback would be to 2013. For which year did you have to be the real estate professional? 2018. Because here's what happens.
Oh, nice.
In 2018, you have a potentially passive loss. Before a passive loss can become a net operating loss. So those are important terms. I've got a passive loss. A passive loss cannot become a net operating loss unless I'm a real estate professional in most cases. There are some other exceptions, but they're pretty rare anymore. Real estate professional is the big relevant one. Being a real estate professional converts your passive loss into a net operating loss. Now, once you're converted into a net operating loss, it's a net operating loss. So whatever year you apply it to, it's not passive, it applies.
So it's almost like a big loophole for someone that just became a real estate professional. Now they can go back. Oh, that's huge. Okay, that's a good.
Oh, and by the way, not to toot my own horn, but there is a saying among lawyers: "He who tooteth his own horn not, he shall never have his horn tooted." And so, toot my horn.
No, that's huge. I mean, no, for those that don't realize it, that one's massive. I think for certain people. The next question.
Oh no, wait, yeah. So wait, let me toot my horn. Did you notice how effortlessly I answered that question?
No, I did. I saw that. I took that as green light. You know, I have to go. We're gonna set up a call, me and you, a little bit later.
Yeah, guys, when it comes to real estate investors, I am most familiar with my feces.
Great, good to hear. Next question that at least that I had kind of going through this. So the $5,000 at the very end that you're kind of talking about, right? With I just blanked out for basically if you have you have a business that had some sort of impact, right? That we talked about at the end. Does that also work for the case where you're not doing a Schedule C, you're doing just a K1? That's and you're not an employee, but you are an employee, right? If that makes sense.
So the trader business would get the credit and collect the money. So let's say I have a partnership that pays a bunch of people and it files W-2s. The partnership itself will be collecting the money from the government.
So then really in that example, so we do a lot of syndications, right? Let's just say we bought an apartment, $1 million purchase. I guess that's even irrelevant. But let's say we had 10 investors, right? Arguably, that's a trader business, like you mentioned. And let's say what's that?
Oh yeah, that's a trade. And listen from that, that's a trader business.
And let's say we didn't get the PPP in that case, right? You said it doesn't count if you got the PPP. Arguably, in that case, we can get $5,000 per investor, right?
No, per employee. In that case, it has to be an employee.
Oh, that was maybe my question. So okay, then if I have a business which is just me and a friend, no employees, that doesn't count then.
Yeah. So for the sick leave and family leave, if you have a business with no employees, the self-employed owners can still get the credit.
So if you have a business with no employees, a self-employed owner, you just call yourself a self-employed owner because you're just doing pass-through.
For purposes of the sick leave and family leave credit, non-employee self-employed people count as employees.
Got it. But for the trader business, if it's just a business,
for the $5,000 credit, it's got to be a W-2 employee.
Oh, okay, I missed that. I don't know why I thought you had said something else. Okay.
Yeah, here's typically where this matters. For the most part, the syndications I see don't tend to have employees. Sometimes they will. Like if they're big enough and they have something they're sitting and operating, they might actually have, for example, a property manager on site, janitorial staff on site that are actually W-2'd. Sometimes it's 1099, sometimes it's W-2. Where we tend to see the employees is at the management company level. Usually there's a separate management company that is the operator for liability purposes and tax purposes, and that's where all the W-2s are at. Those are the ones that are going to get the benefit.
Got it. Okay. But it totally doesn't work for the person that has their own rentals inside of their own LLC kind of scenario.
Now,
I think people
create W-2s. Here's how we can create W. You got to be careful, right? Little hogs get fat, big pigs get slaughtered. So I had some people, when I present this information, are like, oh, well, I'm going to hire my children as employees and my cousin and my dog and my grandmother, and everyone's getting paid $50,000. Yeah, okay, good luck with that, right? That's dumb. On the other hand, if for any reason you have an S corporation, that could be a management company, it could be a flipping business, it could be a side business that provides services, and you're the sole employee, or even if you're not the sole employee, you never put yourself on W-2. Do you know that the law requires, if you have an S corporation, that the owner get a W-2? It is required. So even if you have not done it in prior years, it's required. In fact, we amended some 2019 returns, added people on there as employees so they would qualify for the PPP. And I think it was legit. I don't normally like retroactive stuff like that. You got to be very careful when you do that. But in this case, I have a ton of law, of IRS case law that says if I have an S corporation, I must pay myself a W-2, and the amount of salary must be reasonable, not too low, but reasonable. Well, I just want to follow the law, right? So I better go amend and pay myself a salary. And if it happens that I get some tax credits for that salary.
Okay. Interesting. Who else has questions? Okay, I'll read one. Here we go. If I have a W-2 job and had passive losses carried forward in 2018 and 2019, as a passive investor in syndication, I can amend my taxes?
No, because, hold on one second. Can I still come? Oh, okay. She's still wandering around. I'm good. We're very mindful of the location of the Chilean, right? So the question was, if I had passive losses from a syndication, so I couldn't, the losses never converted to net operating losses. See, what you want is a net operating loss. But if you're not a real estate professional and you get losses passed through from a syndication, they're going to be passive. And so
they
those
stay passive. They never get converted, like you said earlier.
yeah, they sit on your return. So they don't help you until what? I mean, so how do we deal with passive losses? We either try to get you to be a real estate professional, which for a lot of you is not possible. I'll give you an example. Theoretically, my dear sweet wife, who's sitting right here looking at me violent-like, could be a real estate professional, which back when I was in the US and actually paying tax on my tax practice would have been a good thing had she been a real estate professional, because then we could have bought rentals that broke even on cash flow, had depreciation losses, used those losses against my law practice income. And that would have been awesome tax planning. Unfortunately, it would have been horrible life planning, as in I'd like to keep mine. I love my wife. I would die for her, except for when I want to strangle her. She and I cannot do business together. I could never have her run real estate. That would not work. And so there are life issues that keep us from doing things that make a lot of sense for tax reasons. So what's the other approach? I have to generate a passive income generator, a pig. I have to invest in things that generate passive income, and there are ways to engineer that. I want to generate passive income so that now my passive losses have something I can use them against, as opposed to them just sitting on my return.
Got it. And then maybe a related question too, if you are going to go back, right? I think so. If you're going to amend your the example we talked about earlier, right? 2018, you're going back to 2013. If you're going to amend the 2013 taxes, what do they require in terms of, if you've already essentially thrown away all that paperwork, right? And what's the risk of them essentially saying, you know what, we want to re-audit you for 2013? Maybe is the question, right, that I have.
Oh yeah, you're reopening the year.
Yeah,
You amend a 13 return, you're reopening the statute of limitations.
mm-hmm.
Why do you throw things away ever? First of all, just tax guy 101. Everything gets scanned. The IRS will accept a scanned copy of anything as an original. And there's actually a revenue ruling that says that. So if your IRS agent says, no, that's wrong, then you correct them, which is always fun. So you scan everything. Second, you save it in 40 different places for redundancy, because they don't care why you lost the records. They just care that you lost them. And then why would you go back and delete that? That actually takes effort. And has, there are so many things that down the road could matter. I'll give you an example. Statute of limitations for most of you is 3 to 6 years, depending on the nature of the issue. But how can they look at something 30 years later? Well, let's say you sell a building 30 years later and they want you to prove how much you paid for it. That HUD 1 would be useful from 30 years ago, right? So just keep everything.
But then to answer the question, it does reopen just that year for how long?
3 to 6 years, typically.
Okay, got it.
Hey, John, I got a question. You were mentioning back when you were saying that you could take out $100,000 if you qualify for under a certain condition out of your 401k, and you'd have 3 years to be able to pay that back. And then if you said if you didn't pay it back, you would have, is it another 3 years after that you would be paying the taxes on it?
Oh, no. Okay, so it's either or, right? So I pull $100,000 from my IRA or my 401k as a distribution. I have 3 years to pay it back. If I do that, it's treated as if I never took the money out to begin with, ever. So it's basically a loan. If I don't pay it back within 3 years, now I'm taxed on it, but I have 3 years to pay it back, but it's the initial 3 years. So let's say I take out the $100,000 in 2020. It turns out in 2023, I got it all paid back by then. I don't owe any tax, and they still haven't told us how to implement that. In other words, do we say we owe tax in 2020 and then amend 2020 if it turns out we don't owe? Or do we say to the government, we think we're going to put the money back, therefore we don't want to pay tax in 2020, but if it turns out we owe, we'll come back and amend 2020 to pay the tax? We don't know. The government hasn't figured that out yet. So if you pay the money back within 3 years, no tax. If you don't pay it back within 3 years, you had 3 years ratably, 2020, 2021, 2022. to pay the tax on the distribution.
I see. Okay.
And
That's all within that.
That's in addition to, you can borrow from a 401k. So you can take a distribution and you can borrow. So you can theoretically pull 200 grand out of it. And the 100 grand that was a distribution could end up being treated like a loan if you pay it back. So functionally, you can structure it to borrow 200 from your IRA, or sorry, your 401k.
Thank you.
What else you guys got before I go indulge in the remainder of the liquors? A mug instead of a damn little shot glass.
Yeah, let's do. I don't want to keep you too long, John. I definitely appreciate you taking the time. I know it's been what, an hour and a half, so we'll wrap it up. Maybe we'll do 2 more questions and then call it a day.
Okay, cool.
Awesome.
And I assume you guys can edit out the part where I dropped.
Come on, you missed out all the fun stuff we were saying while you were gone, man. All right, let's see. So next question from Sam: is there a rule of thumb for paying yourself salary? I think you mentioned that earlier, but basically, it has to be something that makes sense for the profession that you're gonna call.
Yeah, reasonable, right? Yeah. What would you have to pay someone else to do what you're doing?
The next question is, if you don't pay back 401k withdrawn and then become real estate professional, say by year 3, now can be eligible for more tax favorable events. Will that fly?
That's way too generic, because the 401k withdrawal and the real estate professional status really have nothing to do with each other.
Okay. Nice and easy. And then maybe last one, any tax strategies you recommend for W-2 and passive investors? Oh man, that's probably more generic than the other one.
Yeah, oh my God, that's a whole nother 2-hour webinar. Hey, do you guys mind if I do a very quick shameless self-promo, like 30 seconds?
No. That was going to definitely let you. I was going to say, John, I mean, wrap it up. Please let everyone know what you do, what your strengths are, how to get a hold of you, how to reach out. I know you have your phone number and email here, but please share whatever you'd like. Definitely appreciate you taking the time. This has been super informative, very valuable. I definitely learned a lot, so thank you for that.
Guys,
and I want to buy a book or a course from you, John. What do you got?
We're revamping stuff. So I'm doing a seminar here in Puerto Rico in June, when I assume everyone will be healthy again. And we're also streaming it. We did that last time. We do them twice a year here in Puerto Rico. Here's how we structure them. We do 5 hours a day, because in Puerto Rico, from about 2 o'clock onward, everyone wants to smoke cigars and drink rum, and they don't want to listen to taxes, even when it's humorously and brilliantly done. So typically we start at 8 in the morning and go until 1. And then everybody goes out to drink and eat and have fun. So it's 5-hour days, but what's the key? A 5-hour day is enough to be able to write off the whole day for travel, meals, entertainment, etc. And we do it 5 days: Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday. So you're here for a whole week. Why do we do that? We did it on purpose. The tax rule is the weekend counts as business days, even if you do no business, as long as it's cheaper to stay where you're at than it is to fly home. So we intentionally start the seminar Wednesday and end on a Tuesday, so that the weekend you're kind of stuck here, which is horrible, so that you can go to the beaches or the rainforest or the bioluminescent bay or the rum distillery or whatever. And then we focus on self-directed is probably half of it, self-directed IRAs, 401ks. We get into sophisticated tax planning techniques. For example, we'll get into opportunity zones. We'll get into, of course, the cost segregation studies, which I think is pretty basic. It's sort of the bottom end of sophisticated, and a lot of other types of things. And then we spend 1 day on entity structuring and asset protection. We sell, periodically I do webinars. I do a regular webinar series once a month. You can look at that. It's all at that website, iralawyer.com, and it links to a different website, because I have realestatetaxlaw.com, iralawyer.com. They link to, what is the one it links to now? I always forget. Taxreductionlawyer.com. You can see the stuff we sell there. There's a bunch of basically programs, courses, etc. We also do consulting. What's the good and bad news about consulting with me? I like disclosure. A, just in case you missed it, I'm not sensitive. I don't do political correctness, and I have very little tolerance for whining and BS. So if I've offended you on this call, it's even worse when you're paying me. Just want to be totally, straight up about that. Understand what you're getting. What's the good news about dealing with my firm? We're small. You deal with me directly. I review all returns, and on the planning work, I'm involved. What's the bad news? I'm in high demand. There's one of me. I'm busy. So do you have to sometimes wait? Yeah, typically it's a 2 to 3 week waiting period to talk to me, unless what? There's a triage issue. It's rare. Most of the stuff you guys need me to do can wait 2 or 3 weeks. You may not want to. You have to decide if you're willing to do it or not. I'm worth it. Of course, I'm biased. But we do triage. And with tax planning, when is something usually a rush, a legitimate rush, as opposed to a BS real estate investor thinks it's a rush, but it really isn't? Typically, we found 2 things are a rush. Audits, which really aren't as much of a rush as you think, because when you find out you're getting audited, I just call the IRS and tell them we'll talk to you in 30 days, and then we start preparing for the audit. And in 30 days, I may call them back and say, yeah, we're going to need another 30 days. And sometimes they say, no, you can't have it. And then I go, yeah, right. Anyway, we're going to have another 30 days. And then they're like, no, you can't have it. And I'm like, or what? What are you going to do? Kind of like takes me back to my hometown of Youngstown, you know? What are you going to do? What's going to happen to me? Well, we're going to end the audit. No, you won't. Your supervisor won't let you. We need more time. We're gathering materials. You'll bloody well wait. Now, you don't want to push that any harder than you have to. I like to keep my powder dry and not push the agents until later in the audit. I'd rather not push them in the beginning because, you know, you're using up gunpowder. I don't like to do that, but I can. What's the truly urgent item from you guys? What is truly something that if you call my office, probably will get you to the front of the list? You have a closing and there are tax issues that could screw up the closing. And if the closing doesn't happen on time, you lose the deal. Okay, that will get me on the phone pretty quick. Usually it involves IRAs or 401ks, but sometimes it'll involve 1031s or installment sales. It could involve all kinds of stuff. But that's really, if you think about it, most of what we do in terms of planning, doing tax work for people, if it's done today or a month from now, it doesn't really make a difference. But I do want to be upfront. I'm in demand. I'm very good at what I do. And sometimes you have to wait. And I'm crotchety and I'm evil and I have a lousy attitude and I get away with it because I'm good at what I do. So if any of that is a turnoff to you, just go hire someone else. It's a big country. There are plenty of other people. That's it. That was the spiel.
Nice.
I know, right? That's how you this is how you attract people. Like, yeah, this is me in a good mood, kind of mellow, had my shot of rum.
I love it, man. Much appreciated. Thank you so much for being here. The smartest man in the room.
Glad to do it. Hope we saved you guys some money. Hope we gave you some stuff you never heard of. Hope you go and dig and implement and keep what belongs to you. Because unlike what the prior president said, he didn't build that. You did. You deserve to keep every freaking nickel that we can legally and ethically squeeze. Go get them.
Thank you so much,
Awesome.
Mr. John Hyre III.
Thank you, John.
Helpful.
Very informative. Anyone watching this live or any of our recordings, reach out to John if you need any type of tax legal advice. He is definitely the man I recommend. Someone I've known for 3 or 4 years. Much love, much thank you for gracing us with your presence, my friend.
Take care.
Awesome. Let's end this thing. And thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. We will see you in 2 weeks from now. Topic we will launch here the next day or two. And we will be launching more information on the mastermind. Let's go, let's grow, let's crush it, let's win together. Multifamily Masters 2020 is a great year. Let's take full advantage of it.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.